So what does over 20 years of technological development in overdrive pedals actually sound like? And what difference in sound are you actually paying for when you pay all that extra money for the Revival Drive? And are there any scenarios where, regardless of price, the OD-3 might actually be a better choice than the Revival Drive? First, I'm just going to let you hear the differences in sound between the two pedals for yourself. So for this, I've used some settings based on the recommended settings from the manual of the Revival Drive, as well as a more generic low drive setting that I've hit with some fuzz so we can hear how the two pedals react in slightly different ways when being hit with other gain pedals. So the differences in sound, does it really warrant that extra money for the Revival Drive? Does it represent 20 years worth of development of technology of overdrive pedals? For me, plugging into the Revival Drive, I thought didn't give me an immediately better sound. It didn't give me a better like overdrive sound that I preferred. It was just a different flavor, and what I think the Revival Drive really gives you is that ability to fine tune, obviously. But fine tune it in very subtle and sophisticated ways. We're not just talking about EQ. You can shape it in the way that it compresses, the way that it responds to your picking attack, all these and loads of other things that I won't get into. But one of the main things was probably in the high end. That was the thing I noticed the most on all settings. The OD-3 has a much more open top end that can be a tiny bit shrill sometimes if you let it, and you have to compensate for it in your playing technique a little bit. I don't really mind it, but on the Revival Drive it was a little easier to get on with. It was just a little bit more compressed in the high end, although when hit with fuzz it rolled off a bit more off the top end of the fuzz than I would like. I kind of prefer the OD-3 for that, but those are just, those are the overall differences I found, which were very small. For me, the Revival Drive doesn't really represent 20 years of development of technology. It represents the way that us guitarists use pedals in a different way, or how a lot of us use pedals in a different way. A lot of people want that fine tuning, that ability to fine tune and hone their sound themselves on the pedal, rather than leave it up to the designers like you kind of do with the OD-3. You're left to the way they designed it. So that is really what I think you're putting your money into when you get the Revival Drive. It's that ability to fine tune in very subtle and sophisticated ways. So are there any scenarios where the OD-3, regardless of price, is actually a better choice than the Revival Drive? For one, I would say rocking up for a jam with 2 or 3 battery powered pedals. The OD-3 with a distortion and maybe a delay or reverb that is perfect. You know, you're not going to be distracted by all the fine tuning of the Revival drive that for just a jam you probably don't need anyway. For those sort of more informal situations, I think the OD-3 is just fine. Also at gigs where you just want ease of use and ability to quickly change your sound, I would still say OD-3 can sometimes be a better choice. Say if you're at a gig and you just want your sound to be a little bit less bright, you have to make decisions on the Revival drive as to whether you take the high end down, or maybe you take the low end up, or maybe you do both, or maybe you change the presence control. But if you change the presence control, which way do you turn it, and how does that change your sound? Can you remember from the manual how it turns into a right mess? Or you do the fine tuning dial at the bottom, and by the time you've made all those decisions, you're so far away from where you were with your playing, there's no point. But with the OD-3, there's a tone control and that's it. You take the tone control down and you deal with it. And that, for me, is the appeal of the OD-3 still. It's in its ease of use and its simplicity. Having said that, say you're on an expensive session and you've got, say it's a studio session and you've got a full day on one song and a fussy producer. In that scenario, I think the Revival drive really comes into its own. You've got that ability to fine tune it for a particular song or a particular part, and the OD-3 is going to be far more limited. So which one should you get? I'd recommend getting an OD-3 first. I've got links down in the description to some good prices for that, and see if you like that flavor of Overdrive. It's fairly flat frequency response and it's very amp-like in its smooth Overdrive sound. If you like the sound of it, but you really want that ability to fine tune not just the EQ, but the way it responds and the way it compresses as well, then by all means spend that extra money and get something like the Revival drive. I've got links for that in the description as well to the best prices I can find. Those are affiliate links, so if you do use those links, it does help the channel a little bit. If you found this video useful, think about liking and subscribing, and thanks for watching.